Okay, everyone, let's get this show back to order here. Trustees, with your indulgence, I would like to exercise my remarks now. And I'm going to do a quick cursory look and not really see whether anybody objects because I plan on doing it anyway. I have two issues I just want to touch on. The first is one that strikes fear into all our hearts when we hear about it. Last Friday at an elementary school in Connecticut, an atrocious attack on a school left a community reeling. And I imagine that any of us with either kids or grandkids in a school that day probably had their hearts jump when you think of how quickly 20 young lives were taken and so unnecessarily. Schools must be a sanctuary, and it's hard to understand how anybody or how a society gets to the point where they no longer are. I have a letter that I am sending to the chair, Debbie Ledling, on behalf of the board, and I wish to read sections of it to you tonight. On behalf of the students, staff, parents, and trustees of the Upper Canada District School Board in Ontario, Canada, please accept our sincere condolences on the tragic loss of your students and teachers last Friday at Sandy Hook Elementary School. We were left speechless upon hearing the traumatic experience in your district. Immediately you entered our hearts, our prayers, and you will remain there. While we are many miles away, we are also grieving with the sudden loss of so many innocent lives. Such tragedies call for extensive supports to be in place for those who mourn the loss of students and teachers, and we know that you will be challenged to care for them in the days and weeks ahead. However, the resilience of you and your colleagues will ensure that these supports are provided. Your caring communities responded quickly with admirable respect and dignity to assist those in need. You can be proud of your students, staff, and community members, and signed on your behalf by myself. And that will be sent today. In memory, I would ask that you all stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. On another note, we've also become aware that recently some of our community members have been, did you have that stack? Community members have been recognized by the Diamond Jubilee Award, an award minted in celebration of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. Some 60,000 Canadians have been recognized over the last year. We became first aware of our first nominee was our own trustee Peter Garrow, and we've now become aware that many more, including former principal Arlie Kirkland, former school council chair from IPS and Seaway Helen Tupper, and former trustee David Dargy have also received this prestigious award. We had intended tonight to read off the list of all the members, and we're working diligently today. I was working with the communication department, but I have to be very honest that it took us a while to find a couple of the lists, and while we think we have everybody, I think it would be a more grievous error for us to not remember everybody. So I'm going to say that at the next meeting we will have a complete list and announce them at the next board meeting. Okay. All right. Move on now with the agenda. We have consent agenda items, agendas and minutes. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items. Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee McMillan. The Upper Canada District School Board approved consent agenda items 2.02, 2.05, December 19th, 2012 is submitted. You go ahead and vote. Okay, that passes. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Trustee McAllister?
Negotiations.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move into committee of the whole item to discuss item 5.01. Can I have a motion to move into committee of the whole? Moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Swan. Pastor. All right, that passes. Tonight we have draft policy 438, integrated accessibility standards regulation. Talk about destroying a policy with a name. Not directed at you, Superintendent. I'm sure it was a prescribed sort of title, but quite a title. Maybe you want to enlighten us as to what it means.
Yes, thank you, Chair Peterson, with that, and I'd be pleased to enlighten you with what that means. And I really appreciate some time to talk about actually and to introduce this integrated accessibility standards policy. I know that as a board that inclusion is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and it's something that we're very passionate about. And there is a great deal of good work that's going on, and this integrated accessibility legislation seeks to further break down barriers through clear accessibility standards. You might recall that back in 2009, the board put into place for the first accessibility standards, we put into place customer service. This standard was very much about awareness building of the Accessibility Act, and as we move towards the province's goal of an accessible Ontario in 2025. In July of 2011, the next three standards were put into regulation, and these were the information and communication, which gives people with disabilities access to information we all depend on. Employment standard, which is about welcoming people with disabilities into our organization, and transportation, about making it easier for people with disabilities to get to where they need to go. These three standards laid the groundwork and were the requirement for the requirement that the school boards now have to implement an integrated accessibility standards policy and procedure for January 2013. The draft of the policy, the new policy, which is in front of you, and I'm not going to won't read the whole thing, but what it sets out to is to demonstrate, the policy demonstrates that the board is commitment to providing services that are free of barriers and biases, and ensures that the principle of equity and opportunities reflected and valued in our learning and working environments. A key aspect of this policy is the awareness training for all staff, and that classroom staff deliver instruction through the lens to students through a lens of accessibility awareness. And to this end, a consortium that OTSPA put resources to and provided They provided, this consortium has provided resources and has worked with boards with the resources to put this into place, as well as with the multi-year plan to implement the accessibility awareness training requirements and the consider of accessibility when purchasing goods or services. And just to conclude, coming out and we're working on it right now within the draft of a multi-year plan that this policy will require for the implementation of the integrated accessibility standards policy. And the multi-year plan will be in place by the end of January 2013.
Okay, thank you very much, Superintendent Edwards. That makes it much clearer. So much more achievable, too.
Yes.
Trustee McAllister.
Susan, how does this policy jive with the fact that we know, as I think Jeremy has stated at previous meetings, that a number of our buildings are not accessible?
This is the integrated accessibility standards, and so as we're working towards it, the next standard that will be coming out will be the built environment standard, and that standard I believe is coming out in 2014 or 2015. So as Jeremy, I'll let Jeremy speak for the part in terms of how they're working towards accessibility. But this integrated accessibility standard does not include the built environment at this point in time. That will be a different standard that comes out later.
So this is primarily integration.
Yes, of the customer service
sorry,
and
I
it's about attitude, working on attitudes and awareness building.
Do you want to add anything, Mr. Hobbs?
No, other than, as Superintendent Edwards stated, the built environment standard has not yet been released or finalized, so that although we have been anticipating some of the broad strokes of that standard and have reviewed the drafts, we really haven't got a real sound sense of what the transition plan would be for that. So in the meantime, what we typically do with our accessibility measures from a facility standpoint is address the needs of individual students as they sort of arise. So as students that have particular accessibility needs enroll in our schools, or we're anticipating their enrollment in our schools, we start looking at measures designed to accommodate those students in our buildings. And then also this past fall, in anticipation of the built environment standards, we actually started taking a more coordinated approach in the facilities department. So rather than sort of doing this ad hoc modifications as student needs presented themselves, we've actually put a rough structure together for what we would consider to be our own accessibility standards for our schools, and are starting to plan out a 10-year plan to systematically address some of the things in schools, recognizing that there are some buildings that, for all intents and purposes, it would be, practically impossible to make them fully accessible as though we would for a brand new facility. But there are a number of measures that we can take to dramatically improve the level of accessibility for students and community members.
Any other comments or questions? Trustee McDonald?
With reference to the policy, should it, with reference to it, within the policy, should it make reference to the regulation? Does it need to make reference to the regulation?
Under the legal reference.
To the regulation of the Accessibility Standards Act of 2005. We could put that up in terms of the cross-reference. That's a good point, Trustee McDonald.
It's the act, and then there's Regulation 191, which deals with this.
So that's a good.
Which actually is driving the requirement for the policy.
Right.
Just to follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair, with respect to the
Yes.
to the built environment, thank you. My understanding as well, I believe there is a regular review of the building code, and that building code is being reviewed currently. So the built environment, those requirements are included within the building code. So that is going to kind of go hand in hand once the building code is reviewed. those will set the parameters for implementation, or at least the direction of what the built environment should look like according to the building code. So that would be some time, and then you've got some time, not you personally, but the board, any employer for that matter, right? This act does not just deal with municipalities or school boards, it deals with any business for that matter. So there's an opportunity for us to move into acceptance of this, or meet the criteria by, I think it's 2025. So there is some significant financial requirements that we're going to have to undertake over the next few years to be able to make some of our aged buildings accessible.
Any other comments or questions? Yep, go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
So the policy states that we have a plan. The plan will be developed in January 2013.
The plan is pretty well completed. We're looking for another meeting to pull together committee members, and just to expand the committee. We're looking for representation from SEAC and another community member to pull it together, and it'll be ready by, there are challenging times, and so that we would have liked to have the plan ready for January 1st, 2013, but the plan will be ready by the end of January.
So even though it's not at the final stage yet, there's I guess some idea of what the plan would look like. In order to meet this requirement, and having the plan in place, are there costs associated to that? Part of the communication aspect is that if someone required something to be signed, we would have to have the opportunity, the ability to have that person have a signer available to that individual. There's lots of other implications around the communication aspect. Have we been able to put any costs associated to that yet?
Go ahead.
Just beginning to cost it right now. In fact, that's something that really concerns us, is that there's gonna be real costs, and we do not see anything from the ministry yet flowing to support this. You've just described everything from Braille to our meeting to how they're gonna be done when we post them in different ways. These things have not been costed to our knowledge right now, Rick. And there is significant costs, you're right.
Any other comments? Just a note that Trustee Swan is the trustee on your committee, correct?
Okay, thank you, yes. And just want to further, while there are some significant costs, many significant costs that are going to come into place, there are some that are very low cost. For example, sometimes it's just a matter of increasing the size of the print from a photocopier for communication. So they're low, and that's what this the integrated standards policy is about, is bringing awareness of different ways of making our buildings and our communication and everything more accessible. So some are high cost and some are low cost.
Okay, anything else? We've been asked, due to the timeliness of this document, I think we have a requirement to have it in place by the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a requirement for it to be in place by January 1st.
That we not recommend its passage to tonight's board meeting. You move it.
I would move it just with the inclusion of the reference to the regulation, the legal parameters.
And recommend approve policy 438 with the discussed amendments. You moving it? Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Karkner. Go ahead and vote, everyone. Okay, that passes. Okay, it's what's wrong?
We need to do a motion to move back into the board.
Yep. Now I need a motion to move back into the regular meeting. Moved by trustee Carpenter, seconded by trustee McPherson. Okay.
I'm just waiting on
No.
Yeah, no, kick me out, but I had to get back in.
Trustee Swan, you're in favor, opposed? How did you vote?
In favor.
Didn't register. Okay. All right. Must have started, system must have started Christmas holidays early.
Okay, that's for David.
Make another joke, but I'm not going to.
Kicks me out every once in a while.
I wonder why.
When you have control.
You wouldn't get back in them. There was no private session for December 5th. This evening, one contractual item was discussed. No motion. Report from public session. Committee of the Whole, December 5th, 2012. The request that the board approve from Committee of the Whole to approve the revised fundraising policy. Anybody want to move that? Moved by trustee McDonald, seconded by trustee McMillan. Any comments or questions? Yep, go ahead, trustee McPherson.
Just that Brad O'Neill is vice principal Wolford and not Montague. That's the correction. Might be surprised he showed up to work at Montague some morning.
Okay. You go ahead and vote. Okay, I'd also like to add passing of the policy 438 integrated accessibility standards, and I'd like a motion to add it to the agenda. Moved by trustee Richards, seconded by trustee Karkner, just to add it to the agenda because it wasn't here before. We need to put it on the agenda first, and I need a 2/3 majority for this vote.
I haven't opened it yet.
Writing a motion. Trustee Karkner?
It's in reference to 701. Do you want to wait till you get this up?
Okay, go ahead.
In the report we have in front of us here, we had the Arts Charter update. During that discussion, there was discussion about us continuing the $300,000, and they asked for guidance. Is that something we are about to motion or not, or is it already in the budget?
It's gonna be a part of the budget deliberations. So you're gonna have to,
Discuss it at that point.
it has been every year.
Okay. Thank you, that passes. Now we have policy 438 integrated accessibility standards regulation. And mover and a seconder to approve this policy. Trustee McDonald, trustee Swan. Go ahead and vote. Sorry, what?
I can't add it that quickly, so if you just.
All right. All in favor? Is there anybody opposed? Trustee Garrow, are you opposed?
Oh, I'm not.
You're in favor? Okay, that passes. All right, we'll move on now to negotiations update. McAllister, who I might add is decked out in Christmas splendor, as is the director, and I'm sporting a Christmas tie too. And oh yes, and Trustee Buckland. I want to thank everybody for celebrating, bringing Christmas to the board table. Where?
It's cringe.
Color of the coal.
Okay, negotiations update. Charlotte, do you wish to discuss that? Add anything at this point?
Just like to remind trustees that both ETFO and OSSTF are in a strike position at this point in time. They have implemented sanctions both in the elementary and the secondary panel, most of which would be described as work to rule, essentially administrative tasks, and in the secondary panel, they are not doing assigned supervisions. And of course, tomorrow, December the 20th, the ETFO local here in Upper Canada will stage a one-day walkout. And as you are aware, our schools remain open and our buses will be running in order to accommodate those students who attend school tomorrow.
Superintendent Coombs, do you want to just fill us in on how that preparation and the rollout of that plan to keep the schools open has gone forward?
Certainly, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Once we established that our goal was to keep schools open and give families an opportunity where there may not be one for them, to have a safe and secure care for their child, we engaged in a pre-registration process. We wanted to find out exactly how many families would be out there and how many would take advantage of this. And then we determined whether we could safely accommodate and supervise those children. So what preliminary, as the data started coming in, we also ran a statistical analysis, and of course Mr. Carswell led us in that endeavor, and determined that even if 20% of the kids showed up, we would have enough non-teaching staff to successfully, to safely supervise all the kids to a 15-to-1 ratio. We chose 15-to-1 because that's the safe ratio for a field trip. So that is actually above a safe ratio than we would normally have in a school day. After that was determined, we communicated to our communities, to our parents, that this would not be business as usual, that we would not be having normal class instruction, but we would be supervising kids safely, and to please let us know if that was their intention. As of the end of today, we have dispersed board office staff into schools around the board. We've paid special attention to those schools that will be picket sites tomorrow, as well as other schools that have perhaps a little bit more than 5 or 6 or 7%, which has been the average at the rest of our schools. So we're ready to go, and we're prepared for tomorrow.
Okay. We're also, okay, go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
So we know what's gonna happen between now and Friday. I think there's some misinformation or misunderstanding of what might happen between now and December 31st. What's the actual timeline date? Why is December 31st so important, I guess, to us as a board and to education in general?
Superintendent Patterson.
Through you, Chair. December 31st, 2012 has been identified as the date at which time the Ontario government would be in the position to impose collective agreements throughout all of the boards in Ontario. And so we, of course, have been negotiating with all of our unions up until November 27th, at which time OSSTF, our secondary union, suspended negotiations, but we've continued negotiations with ETFO and with CUPE, and in fact met with CUPE as recently as today.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair, is it our expectation that the Ministry of Education will follow through with what they said they're going to do December 31st? Is that the board's expectation that that will happen?
Director?
Through you, Chair, we're not certain. We believe that's very political, and at this particular time, our plan is to take the minister at her word, and that she'll be imposing collective agreements. However, it would appear to many of us that there has been capitulation throughout, and there's been a history of moving away from deadlines and extending them. We are uncertain, but it's difficult to determine. I believe that the Trustees Association may be a good group to ask that question.
Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. Just to follow up on those comments, I guess my concern is we don't know whether the minister will extend the deadline or not. We don't know whether they will impose, and I think if they do impose, it will create more difficulty for us as a school board, potentially for our teachers, our students, and our parents. I think we've been very bold in other steps, and perhaps this is an opportunity for us to be bold as well, again. And as a board, collectively, we asked the minister officially to extend that timeline. But beyond that, potentially, I think there's an impasse here. I don't think that the union is willing to, unions, I should say, federations, are willing to settle much on what's being presented to them in Bill 115. I think the minister has dug her heels in. In fact, the government has dug their heels in. Perhaps there's something that we can do as well and encourage the minister to look at hiring a mediator and letting this go to a process where it would be resolved by someone other than the government, and having someone at least facilitate that process. And that would be, I think, another opportunity for us to try and find some resolution to this situation in the province.
That motion, I would second it.
Yeah. Just before, you're also thinking of moratorium too? Did you just-
Well, I guess from a moratorium standpoint, then, that would ensure that the facilitation, the mediation, and I'm not a labor expert by any means, but that would allow that process to go through the process, and it will allow our students to remain in school and our teachers to remain in the classroom teaching those students. So I would certainly add that on as something that we should embark upon.
Director?
Through you, Chair Peter, Trustee McDonald, we have every step of the way shown our willingness to meet at any table. And in fact, we have encouraged that level of mediation, and we would support the fact that to get our sports back and to get our clubs back and our music and our co-curriculars back properly, any type of situation that would encourage collective bargaining and communication. As you know, we were the last group. The chair and I drove to Toronto and met with the union at the very last minute before this Bill 150 was created. We are prepared to meet anywhere at any time to get a deal to support public education and to encourage our communities to have confidence in public education.
Just to follow up,
Yeah, go ahead.
I truly believe that we are doing that. I think we need to send some message to the rest of the boards in the province and to the minister that we encourage them to do the same thing at the official level, at the higher level. I think we've proven ourselves that we are committed to the students by the process that we've undertaken so far. And I'm not suggesting that our locals have not. Certainly it's a greater authority having some influence over them. So I think it would be worthwhile for us to at least put that motion forward, encouraging the minister to look at that option.
I think I'd rather use ask.
Yeah.
Ask Minister Broughton to hire a mediator to facilitate local bargaining process to final collective bargaining agreements during this process.
encourage was me being polite. Request would be another one, ask,
Yes,
demand, whatever.
Any agreements during this process? We go to back to finalize the collective agreements, period. During this process, all parties would enter into a moratorium of any and all sanctions. Is that right?
Spell that. Yeah, go ahead. M-O-R-A-T-O. Okay, I'm so close.
Following a successful process, the boards would be given sufficient time to negotiate local agreements. Okay, well, let's discuss this a bit more and we'll parse away at this. Any other, Trustee McPherson?
One of the things that I find disturbing with this whole process, and we know it started last February, is the fact that there's been many opportunities for people to sit down and talk. And the other thing that's disturbing is the amount of uncertainty we face within the next 2 weeks or 6 weeks. First off, with our, what could be another artificially imposed deadline, or it could be the final deadline. We don't know, we can't predict. Also, we have a change of leadership coming in Toronto. We do not know what shifts will occur as a result of that. And I'm not even going to mention the potential of a provincial election next spring. I just think that there's been ample opportunity over the past year's time to have reached resolution on this. And if this is a Hail Mary or just a feel-good motion, then go ahead and do it. But I question whether it's actually going to have any effect on what is going to roll out over the next 2 to 8 weeks.
I think that there's, the merit would be in that it's a little bit of defense, because it certainly puts the pressure on the minister again to solve the problem, gives her a solution to the problem. And I think that that's clear, that's key, because we know that if her response in August is anything to go by, at the first opportunity she's going to get, she's going to throw us and the unions under the bus. So I think that
That's a school bus.
no, definitely not. That was a poor analogy. I regret that. Anyway.
Off the train.
Anyhow, that's I think that one of the reasons why. Trustee Buckland, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I think we merely need to extend the deadline. Keep it simple and install a mediator. And I think this would give Toronto senior leadership in education some help. And it also, again, demonstrates leadership from a little board in Eastern Ontario. But, I don't want to get it too involved, Mr. Chairman.
Do you think it's too involved right now? What you seconded is too involved?
Well, you were mumbling up there, adding things, and I missed it.
Okay.
So if I could hear the Mr. Trustee McDonald's complete motion.
As the discussion.
Yeah.
I seconded the attempt.
Just to add to the discussion, and I'll try not to mumble. The trustees should keep a sense of urgency here. Our students have been outstanding. They have been very concerned at the secondary level about the sanctions. They have protested in a respectful, democratic format to let people know that this is their year of school. They didn't expect this, they didn't ask for this, they'd like a better deal. I must say the backdrop, it has to be urgent, so if we're doing this, it should be something that should be done tomorrow. And the other piece, I also remind you, the reason why it's urgent, we have a potential legal challenge that's been brought forward by a number of the big unions that are challenging this. And this will be a significant backdrop for the issue. And I believe the court challenge will be the end of the negotiations. But if we could, I think there's some interesting things that Trustee McDonald has proposed about a moratorium or some sort of thing of that nature till the 2 years may be very appropriate. Our board here in Eastern Ontario may give a good idea for the minister to use. Create a moratorium on this issue, and we'll wait to see what the courts say. I think it's something you guys should consider. But there may be an opportunity even tomorrow for the chair to address a provincial audience on this issue.
Okay, so, not to mumble, I'll sit up. The Upper Canada District School Board asked Minister Broughton to hire a mediator to facilitate, not local bargaining process, the provincial bargaining process, to finalize, the provincial, what's it being called? Is there a name for the provincial discussions? We had PDT before. Is it called something else? Something now?
They are the required terms.
We're going to finalize the provincial discussions, we'll say. During this process, all parties would enter into a moratorium of sanctions. And is it of sanctions or?
Moratorium to lift the sanctions.
Moratorium, no, you can't moratorium.
You want a moratorium, the sanctions, right?
Moratorium the sanctions?
It's not a verb, it's a noun.
Okay, so correct it for me, somebody.
Moratorium on the sanctions.
On the sanctions, not of, on sanctions, of sanctions.
We could just use plain English and say lift the sanctions until the
All
court
parties
gives
would
their-
lift sanctions. During this process, all parties would lift their current sanctions.
Suspend them.
Would suspend current, that's even better, suspend,
Sanctions and job actions.
suspend sanctions, there you go, just, that's it. Suspend sanctions and end that sentence, get out of it fast. Isn't democracy fun? Okay, I'll read it from the start. That the Upper Canada District School Board asked Minister Broughton to hire a mediator to facilitate the provincial bargaining process to finalize provincial discussions. During this process, all parties would suspend sanctions. Following a successful mediation, the board should be given sufficient time to negotiate local agreements.
On the procedure, should it be a special mediator? Because under normal circumstances, we do get into mediation, don't we?
Sure, I don't have a problem with that if that's, special mediator. Hire a special mediator. Insert the word special. Yeah, retain, that's even a better word. Oh, God, we're smart.
Powerful.
Okay, anything else?
The border boards in here, the last paragraph, the last sentence.
Following sections, boards.
Can you say moratorium on any job action?
What I said, what we decided finally was during this process, all parties would suspend sanctions.
And you're not using the word moratorium?
No. Suspend, moratorium, what's the difference? No?
Moratorium means no new. And suspend means stop.
Stop the job action.
Chair Petersma?
Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Garrow.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Chair, the reason you're doing this is, of course, in the spirit of putting students first,
Yep.
keeping schools open. Would that not be part of it?
In what way? How would you add that in, Trustee Garrow?
I think as a preamble. Or even looking at the deadline of December 31st, which was spoken about before.
Couldn't preempt,
to-
to maintain peace and stability in the schoolhouse and to ensure that students are put first.
Just that that's the underlying principle of why
Okay, schoolhouse.
To ensure peace and stability in the schoolhouse, that's our language.
Oh.
And to ensure that students are put first. We propose, or we make the following motion.
No, I would just, first, the Upper Canada District School Board asks Mr. Broughton. Okay, put first comma. And then get rid of that. And then first, the Upper Canada District School Board asks. And a change obtain to ensure, second word. To ensure peace and stability in the schoolhouse and to,
He's got it twice.
and to,
To maintain peace and stability in the schoolhouse and ensure that students are put first.
as in democracy, nice and neat. To maintain peace and stability in the schoolhouse and to ensure that students are put first, the Upper Canada District School Board asks Minister Broughton to retain a special mediator to facilitate the provincial bargaining process to finalize provincial discussions. During this process, all parties would suspend sanctions. Following the successful mediation, boards would be given sufficient time to negotiate local agreements. Trustee McPherson?
Okay, just one small question. Suspending sanctions by all parties. Now, that is not negating any of the requirements of Bill 115.
I don't think they're really called sanctions.
It's legislation.
That's legislation. I think sanctions are if we were to lock out, that kind of thing. Yeah. Mover and seconder are okay with the language. Trustee Buckland, are you okay with the language?
Well, I'm concerned about the power of the union. Does the minister have the power to say, all right, you can't walk out and you can't work the rule while this is going on?
Yes.
And have it accepted by the union?
Well, this would be a deal between, right? She'd have to, we're setting the parameters for what we expect to have happen.
Let her go. She needs the help.
Any other comments? All right, take your vote. Wake up. Okay, I'm in favor. Oh, there we go. Jeff's in favor. All right, that's unanimous. Thanks, everyone. Tomorrow, just so that in case you haven't seen the announcement, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I will be holding a press conference at Winchester Public School to discuss this item and several other concerns that we have. We issued a press release earlier in the day, and we're hoping that we'll be able to add some valuable feedback from school board's perspective to the debate. Anybody that wants to come and join is welcome. Jeff has consented to come up and be with me, as David Coombs and Terry Simser will be. David's going to be elsewhere.
I'm looking, I'm helping kids in the school. Stop it. I'm gonna have floor hockey in the South Branch gym, whoever wants to come and play with me.
Do they know about your record with the Peterborough Pete's? Are they getting out that YouTube video?
They could get that, the kids will behave.
Are you sharpening your elbows?
Not sure that this is good. All right, thanks, everyone. That concludes our labor update. Welcome back, Trustee McAllister. Report to the Special Education Advisory Committee.
I'd like to make a report on the meeting which was held on December the 4th. As you note in the agenda, that was greatly in Superintendent Valerie Allen's presentation of Caring and Safe Schools, which is essentially the Upper Canada District School Board strategy with regard to living well and mental health. There was a question about the proposed the proposed board policy, which is in development stages at the present time, concerning electronic devices. There was a letter to the minister, which copied our SEAC committee, which is from the Renfrew Catholic District School Board, and it was a concern with regard to the sustainability of funding for special education. And the minister's response was there. It was a similar, that letter from the Renfrew board was similar to a letter that we had already sent on our behalf. At least you had sent, Chair, I believe, on our behalf at the request of SEAC. There was a review from the last meeting with regard to the role of the mental health addiction nurses and their untold story yet in this board. We were pleased to welcome student trustee Sydney Collar, who joined us for the SEAC meeting, as well as so did Kimberly Wright, representative of the District Association for Community Involvement. And the Superintendent Susan Edwards also made a brief report, and I'm just going to ask if she would comment briefly on it.
Thank you, Trustee McAllister. Yes, at the SEAC, I spoke about two items. One was the representation on the accessibility committee, as well as the accessibility plan. The other report I spoke about was Principal John Gow and Vice Principal Nancy Holman have done some great work with regards to an IEP review and leading that review, and they've brought that inquiry to two families of schools and principals from the families of schools, along with the learning resource coaches and learning resource teachers, undertook taking a look at the IEPs for the purposes of improving their effectiveness and taking a look at the IEPs and how they support student learning, and talked about that and how we have a plan for once job action has ended to take that inquiry approach to other families of schools across our district.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, Trustee Richards or Trustee McPherson, if you had anything to add that I may have omitted?
Just to remind trustees that the meeting for January is a week later than usual, so it'll be on January 8th. So we'd welcome anyone to come to the meeting and join in.
That concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Trustee McAllister. Move on now to our OPSPA report. Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. I pass the floor to Trustee Buckland, as I was not present at the last Board of Directors meeting.
Yep, go ahead, Trustee Buckland.
Proud to take that on as Associate Director with the Director being involved in his business. A two-day meeting of the Ontario Public School Boards Association. Much time was spent in serious discussion of the lack of leadership at the educational level, and much dismay at it, and ultimately hope and almost the edge of prayer for no harm to student learning in the process. There was another area of dismay, and that was that many directors weren't able to attend the Buckland Roast, which was held recently in Cornwall. And as they were ready to fire some volcanic barbs, I'm sure. But just as a side, I would like to thank all those who were involved, Principal Danaher out of Charlan and his committee, including Trustee McDonald. We did raise considerable money for two worthy charities, Fragile X, which is the most commonly inherited mental fragility, 1 in 6,000 girls, 1 in 4,000 boys, and also for the Upper Canada Champions for Kids Foundation. There was considerable discussion, as I said, on the labor negotiations. We had the opportunity to see our new president, Mike Bennett. Is it Bennett?
Barrett.
Mike Barrett, yeah, in action, and did an excellent job. We received a presentation on the first night from a group called NROC Consultants, and they're involved in the high media stuff, such things as Ask an Expert. You are, for example, teaching astronomy in grade 11. You hardly know how to spell it. You're not, you can dial in and within minutes would reach some expert on the issue and have that transferred to the class. I'm not sure how much our own board is using it, but Toronto boards are using it. Ottawa is another, and Durham are good users. There's another presentation they gave us on a day in the life of some expert. So a student could apprentice to an astronaut or some other specialized individual and be with the individual for that day and perhaps receive motivation for something they have an interest in. And so these are excellent programs, and there is funding through other sources that do supply it, and so whether we use it or not, I don't know, but it's not too expensive. Other things, we highlighted our success, of course, in the copyright. OPSBA was a strong leader in that, and seriously reducing the costs, I think from $5.50 to 35 cents per student, full-time student. A mental health summit was also reviewed, and we had our own trustee there, and I think at the next meeting we will arrange to set up a questionnaire which they put out, and we could check our own level of expertise on that. Several other reports of regular business were presented. 2014, now what's happened with the annual meeting, it's been changed, and Niagara will have it in 2014 so that we can join with the Canadian trustees group. So that'll be an exciting and worthwhile professional development event. In 2013, no date yet that I know. Do you have anything further? Someone was saying it's Central East, but...
I understand that, pretty sure it's Deerhurst.
Okay, so, and that will appeal to the director, I'm sure. Yes, he would like to improve his golf or next month, all highlights are on the conference in Toronto, which will be a 3-day conference. The emphasis will be first on the emphasis in future collective bargaining. Experts of all sorts have been brought in. We expect the minister to be there. Assistant Deputy or Minister Grieve will be leading us in early learning, I guess, yeah. Dr. Ivan Joseph from Ryerson will be there as well. Phil Boyd, developing community within the schools. There'll also be regional and rural small board caucus sessions. So excellent opportunities for professional trustee training in the areas of whole child, technology and student success, the multi-year planning, accessibility, so on. And so that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Trustee Buckland, any comments or questions?
The date, perhaps I should give the date of that, January 30th.
I'm trying to secure you some leaf tickets for that.
They're easily available, I guess. Begins January 31st, the evening of the 31st, and concludes on Saturday, February the 2nd.
It's good to see you're full of the Christmas spirit.
You got it. I got the Christmas bug.
The question online wants to know maybe if you were going to be playing Santa.
Whatever I have to do to help the board, I will do.
That is appreciated.
All right, Director, you have any comments?
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes. Everyone have a good break. We have,
Is this the end of it?
and yes, we're coming to the end of the meeting. Want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a safe holiday. Wherever your family and friends are, I hope that you find lots of time to spend it with them. Be good to one another, and just a final happy birthday to Trustee Buckland.
Yeah, maybe just before the trustees go. Last week, Upper Canada TV had its first production. Just be aware of that. We did a thing with John and proved that we could do, we did the volleyball championships, the intermediate volleyball championships at North Grenville. They were broadcast worldwide. David Coombs did the play-by-play. The title, this is the first volume title, was named for Gino Giandrea, our first director of Upper Canada, and Gino was there to give out the trophy, which was very nice. But what happened was in Lanark, and Trustee McPherson may be aware of this, because we had the live stream going out there, the school at Montague was able to watch all their 7 and 8s play. And they played North Grenville, the big giant in the final, and the girls from Montague won. And Charles Benjamin Halford, the principal, had it on all the screens of the smart boards in the school, and the kids who didn't have smart boards were in the gym watching their 7 and 8 girls take on Goliath, and grandparents could have watched it and we were going to put it up on our site so it can be seen at many different, but our intentions are to take a variety of these types of activities, plays, sports, musicals, and put them on through UCTV, our own website, and broadcast about them, encourage parents to be able to watch them who couldn't be there, grandparents to see the good things happening in our schools. And I think David, the first one was a success. I think Terry was quite pleased with the communications department, and Alice Ingles and Steve McKenzie, they just delivered a home run for us, so we can do it, so we're looking forward to other things. On that point, Merry Christmas. So at least you were there.
And I just wanted to touch base on that. I wanted to thank Jeff, or First Vice Chair McMillan, for stepping up to the plate on the second day of it, because he also did the play-by-play, showing yet another talent.
Wow.
Well, and Dave Coombs and I are gonna do basketball season, and we're gonna do it together.
You stepped up and played in a volleyball game.
Yes.
All right.
That's a big attaboy. It was really good.
Yeah, color commentators together. We'll have that down pat.
Dave, play-by-play, your cup.
And what I find hard to believe is how you let this happen. All right, motion to adjourn. Trustee McMillan, Trustee McDonald. Go ahead and vote. Well, I thought you were the master at all things television. Surprised you're letting this go on.
It was productive.